So let's start now a new parak. A new parak. This is on Tezvav Amid Beis. So that's the next mission over here in Masechta Beitzah. Says the Mishnah, Yom Tov Shechal Liyos Erev Shabbos, which was actually the case in Eretz Yisrael, and also in Chutz La'aretz, because Yom Tov, the first day Yom Tov, in Eretz Yisrael, they only had Yom Tov on Friday, so Yom Tov was on Erev Shabbos. We had Friday and Shabbos because we have a second day Yom Tov, but it's still the same rule would apply. The Yom Tov comes on Erev Shabbos. So there's a special concern. You're not allowed to, even though Yom Tov is a lesser level of Kedusha than Shabbos, because on Shabbos, no malacha is permitted. Also on Shabbos, there is the death penalty. There's skila for violating the Shabbos. So on a level, Shabbos is more more strict than Yom Tov. But yet, Yom Tov also is not allowed to prepare for Shabbos. So nowadays, we have refrigeration, we have ways to put on the oven on a timer. I mean, there's various different things that we do. But in the olden days, especially, it was very necessary for them to be able to prepare for Shabbos on Friday. The problem is it's Yom Tov, and you can't prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So what do? So the Mishnah says like this: Yom Tov shachal liyos erev Shabbos. Yom Tov that falls on erev Shabbos. So Yom Tov is on Friday. So the halacha is lo yivashel b'tchilo miyom tov l'Shabbos. You're not allowed to go ahead and cook from Yom Tov on Shabbos because Shabbos is not allowed. Yom Tov is not allowed to prepare for Shabbos. So basically, you can't cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Wait a minute, we'll talk about an Erev Tafshil in a minute. But now we're talking about just without any Erev Tafshilin. You're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov and Shabbos. However, what he does is he cooks for Yom Tov, and if he has left over, he can keep it for Shabbos. But he's not allowed to make a trick. He just has to cook for Yom Tov. That's without an Erev Tavshilin. So let's look the Rashi. Yom Tov lo yivashel b'tchilo. So he says lo yivashel b'tchilo means he shouldn't start to cook the ikra. Don't start cooking and have in mind mainly l'shem Shabbos for Shabbos. You're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Elo l'shem Yom Tov. Yehei tchilas b'shulei. You start off to cook. You're cooking on Yom Tov for Yom Tov. V'hamishuyar, and things that are left over from the food that you cooked. Yehei l'Shabbos. That's for Shabbos. Kidikatonu Yozel. The Mishnah is going to say this in the next sentence, that you cook for Yom Tov, and whatever is left over, you keep for Shabbos. Avol mevashel hu l'Yom Tov. But he says, ubeloy ha'aromo. It shouldn't make a trick, which means he can say, "Oh, I'm cooking for Yom Tov," but he knows that it's way too much for Yom Tov. He knows that he's not going to eat it at Yom Tov. He says, "No." Ubeloy ha'aromo. That's without any tricks. Only seriously what you need for Yom Tov. You're cooking, and if you have leftover, you can keep for Shabbos. But you're not allowed to make extra and pretend, oh, this is really for Yom Tov, and then you keep it for Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. That means ubeloy harama, without any tricks. Okay. Avol mevashel hu liyomtiv. But you could cook for yomtiv. And im hoisir l'Shabbos. If there is leftovers, okay, so you left over for Shabbos. So that's okay. You cook for yomtiv. And if it's left over, it's left over for yomtiv. Now the Mishnah starts talking about Erev Tavshilin. So the Mishnah says, "Ve'oise tavshil me'erev yomtiv." You make a cooked food from before yomtiv, which would mean Thursday. Yomtiv is Friday. Yomtiv is Friday. So on Thursday, erev yomtiv, you cook something. You make a cooked food, and that tavshil is l'shem erev. That's for the purpose of an erev. Erev tavshilin me'erev yomtiv. So you make the tafshil for an erev from erev yomtiv. V'soymech olav l'Shabbos, and you can rely on that erev and to get the cooking done for Shabbos.
Is
Why?
this the introduction of the concept, or was this is this in other places also?
Is this I didn't follow. What was your question?
Is this the introduction of the concept of Erev Tavshilin, or, or or is it something that
No, in
was
this whole
known?
Gemara and the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to talk about all about Erev Tavshilin. This is the source of Erev
Okay.
Tavshilin from here. We'll see two major opinions why we make an Erev Tavshilin. We'll see in the Gemara. But here, it just says you should make a cooked food. We call that Erev Tavshilin from before Yom Tov. And then you're going to rely on that Erev to cook for Shabbos. Now, how big, how much does that Erev, we're saying you make a tafshil. What kind of a tafshil? How much tafshil? Beishamai Oimrim Shnei Tafshilin. Beishamai say you need two cooked, not one, but you need two. Ubeis Hillel Oimrim, and Beis Hillel say no, Tafshil Echad. You just need one. And the Gemara, the Mishnah, for the Gemara is going to explain everything. The Gemara says Vishavin, and they all agree, both Beishamai will agree. Bedog Ubeitzah Sha'olov. They used to smear the fish the way they used to do it. They used to smear an egg on it. So you have a fish and you have an egg. So even though Beis Shammai requires two tafshilin, but he will say that the fish with the egg counts for two tafshilin. Beshavim bedog ubeitza sha'olov shehem shnei tafshilin. Zokt Rashi. What is the egg that is on top of the fish? So Rashi says, "Shehoyu tochin Beitzah al hadog." They would smear an egg on the fish. Today they do that too. They make like they dip the fish into some sort of an egg in a mixture. So they used to smear an egg on the fish. Kurset I said when you roast the fish, that egg with the fish, even according to Beis Shammai, counts as two tafshilin. Beis Hillel doesn't need two tafshilin, but according to Beis Shammai, that counts for two tafshilin. Okay, now lechatchila, that tafshil, that erev, needs to be around until you finish all your cooking for Shabbos. As we'll see the reason later on in the Gemara. But what happens if by accident you ate it up or it got lost? Achloi oisha avad. If he ate it up or it got lost, Koidem Shabishel Kol Tzorkei Shabbos. Before he had a chance to cook all the needs of Shabbos, so now he's back without an Erev. Can he continue cooking? So he says, Loi Yevashel Olav B'tchilo. You cannot start cooking for it. In other words, just like we said before, you can still cook for Yom Tov, and if it's left over, it's left over. But you cannot start cooking for Shabbos if you don't have the Erev Tavshilin. With the Erev Tavshilin, yes, you can cook for Shabbos. B'tchilo. But by the way, I mean, there's some debate about it, but at least by our tradition, you still would have to be able to eat it before Shabbos, but you're still allowed to cook for Shabbos. I mean, you still have to eat it in Yom Tov. You can't cook it right after. There should be enough time so that if guests come, they can eat it on Yom Tov. But that's a separate, we're not talking about it right clearly. So if you lost it, you ate it up, so there's no more Erev Tavshilin, so you cannot cook. On the account of this Erev, you can't cook because there is no Erev. However, the im shiar mimenu kolshu, if any amount remained intact from the Erev, which means it wasn't completely eaten up, but just any amount was left of the Erev, soymech alav, you can rely on that Erev Tavshilin, the Shabbos, so that you can start cooking, you can go ahead and cook for Shabbos. Soymech alav, Zakt Rashi levashil bishvila, that because of that leftovers piece of the Erev, you can go and cook. This whole law of Erev Tavshilin is a law midrabanon. It's not a Torah law. The Torah, we don't have an Erev Tavshilin. So it's a little bit unusual, would seem, for the Gemara to ask a question, Minoha Nimili. Usually you ask, where do we know these words from? If we had a halacha of the Torah, and you ask, where are these words from? But of course, if it's halacha from Rabbanon, these words don't have a source. The source is the Rabbanon. It's not a Torah source. So why is the Gemara asking, Mino Hani Mili? Where do we know these words? So Rashi immediately, the Gemara asks, Rashi addresses this, Mino Hani Mili. And the Gemara is going to answer various verses where we learn it from. But how could there be a verse if it was instituted by the rabbis? How could it be a verse to it? So Rashi explained that. And the Gemara will say the verses. Lav davke mikroi yolef. It doesn't necessarily mean we're learning it from the psukim. As Rashi points out, the Ruve Tavshilin, the Rabbana. Are you able to read the screen by me?
Yeah, small, but I
Yeah. The Ruve Tavshilin, the Rabbana. V'hochi komiboiron. Okay, so what is the question? If it's midrabanon, so why are you asking where do we know it? So he says, this is what he's asking. Ahecha asmachuhu rabbanon. On where did the rabbanon lean it? Which means many times we have a hint in the Torah which the rabbis use to lean on that we should do the halacha in a certain way. So this is the case. The Gemara says, where is it leaned on? Where did the Rabbanon find a support for their contention to make an Erev Tashilin? Omar Shmuel. So Shmuel gives the answer, the Omar Kra. Because it says in the Pasuk, and this is in the Aseres Hadibris, in the portion of Yisrael, it says, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos Lekache. Remember the day of Shabbos to make it holy. He takes this as the posik telling us, never forget the Shabbos. Never forget the Shabbos. Now, when we say you have to remember something, that indicates that you might forget it. Why would we forget the Shabbos? Oh, when Shabbos comes after Yom Tov,
Preparing for Yom Tov.
you may forget it, huh?
We forget it because we have worried about Yom Tov.
Which means you're not going to prepare for it. You mean when we say to remember it, we're trying to tell you, you know what? Don't forget about Shabbos, because when a person is involved with Yom Tov and all the preparations and the meals and everything else, he might forget, next day is Shabbos. If it's a weekday, he's not preoccupied with something else. But if it's a Yom Tov, let's see what Rashi says. Zochreyu ma'achar shabo lashkicha, because it might come to forget it. So that's what you got to remember it. That's what the Torah means. So Rashi explains, Shabo Yom Tov Erev Shabbos. When Yom Tov comes on Erev Shabbos, a regular Erev Shabbos, everybody prepares. We know Shabbos is coming. But when Yom Tov comes on Erev Shabbos, Korev Shabbos Lishtakeach. It's very close. It's very possible Shabbos to be forgotten. Machmas Yom Tov, because of Yom Tov. Why? Because since Erev Shabbos is Yom Tov, Shamar be'besudas hayoyim, because the person increases a lot the meals of the day. It's not the regular weekday which he eats a meager meal. He makes a big feast. Since he's making a big feast, he might take out everything of the refrigerator and take out all the food that he has put away, and there's going to be nothing left for Shabbos. Shabbos, and you are not going to leave over for Shabbos sufficient to honor the Shabbos. These ircha hakosuv lezochre. So the post says, no, don't forget, remember. So what does that got to do with the Erev Tavshilin of making the food from Thursday? So Rashi says, Ukeshema Arev Erev Tavshilin, when you make this Erev Tavshilin, Nimtzo Shezochre. So it turns out that you remember, you're reminding yourself of the Shabbos that is coming, because you made something special for that Shabbos. You made an Erev. Share eine oisa elo machmas Shabbos. Because why are you doing an Erev? Yom Tov doesn't need an Erev. Why are you making an Erev? So you are giving attention and you're staying focused.
Front door.
And you're staying focused on the.
Someone is at
and
Ramp.
you're staying focused on the Shabbos from before Shabbos, and therefore that would be fulfilling, remembering the Shabbos, and you're not going to just eat up everything on Yom Tov, and you're going to leave things for Shabbos. For the Gemara, my time. Okay, so the Gemara explains now. Okay, the pasuk says, remember him, but why did they make an Erev for? We know that you have to remember it. My time is Rashi. Lama tiknu Erev. Why did they institute this Erev, this cooking of the food? Kroi vaday lav be'erev mishtoi, ve'lav erev mishtama mino. The pasuk isn't talking about an Erev, and no Erev can be understood from this pasuk. So, and it's va'asmachta ba'almo. This is just you're leaning it on something to remember it, but it's nothing here to tell us anything about an Erev. The real pasuk is coming to tell us, remember the day to make Kiddush. That goes for the Kiddush of the day. That's why we have Zocher Es Yom. Remember it we make Kiddush, Kiddetanya b'psachim, Zachreu al hayoyim. So since the Erev is midrabanon, umaro l'sakin. So the Erev is midrabanon. So why did the Chachamim see fit to institute the Erev? There's no pasuk for the Erev really over here. So Rava gives the explanation. Kidei sheyivrer mona yofel l'Shabbos umona yofel l'Yom Tov, so that he should choose a good portion for Shabbos and a good portion for Yom Tov. Rashi, Amarov Dichulu, B'toich Shema Arev, since he's making the Erev, he is putting away that cooked food for the Erev. Zoicher es Shabbos, so then you remember Shabbos, Ve'enoi Mechale es Hakoil Yom Tov, and you don't finish everything up for Yom Tov. Uboirer Mona Lozeh, Umona Lozeh, and you choose one portion for Shabbos and one portion for Yom Tov. So basically, making the Erev on Erev Yom Tov puts Shabbos into focus, and therefore you will remember to prepare for both. Don't get overwhelmed just with Yom Tov, but also remember the Shabbos, and that's why we make the Erev. That's the opinion of Rava. Ravashi Omar. Ravashi disagrees. According to the reason of Rava, it means it's the honor of Shabbos that we had in mind over here, because we didn't want you to eat up everything for Yom Tov. We wanted you to keep in mind also Shabbos. But Ravashi disagrees. Ravashi Omar, Loi lekovid Shabbos tiknuho, elo lekovid Yom Tov. This was not instituted to honor the Shabbos, but to honor Yom Tov. Which means
then he would need another pasuk.
that's the reason we put up an Erev on Thursday.
And then he
But
would need another pasuk. He would need a
No.
different pasuk for that.
That's correct. That's correct. But he doesn't bring a pasuk at all. We'll have another pasuk soon, but good point. But he says the Erev, that's exactly what he's saying. Lo l'chvei Shabbos tiknu, like you're trying to say from Zacharis Yom Shabbos, and l'kavod Yom Tov. How does this honor Yom Tov? Because when he's cooking on Thursday, you're basically saying, we don't want Yom Tov to cook for Shabbos. So you're honoring Yom Tov. So people should say, so learn, so people should take Yom Tov very seriously. Since we're saying that you're not even allowed to bake from Yom Tov for Shabbos, for sure you're not allowed to bake from Yom Tov for the weekday. How are you going to say that? Because you see that the only reason we allow you to cook for Shabbos is if you started cooking from Thursday. You're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov or Shabbos unless you started from the daytime. So now, since you already started cooking from Thursday for Shabbos, so now it's only as if you're keep on continuing the work. Avol aschuli loy, but to start the baking from Yom Tov to Shabbos, you're not allowed to. So people will see that even for Shabbos, we don't just let you. So from Yom Tov for the weekday, for sure not. And therefore, that's the reason why you make an Erev Tavshilin. The first opinion was that it was for Shabbos, so you don't eat everything up. Second opinion is to keep the Yom Tov, the sanctity of the Yom Tov, that people should see with respect, that even for Shabbos, we don't allow you only if you started from before Yom Tov. Certainly not for the weekday. You're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for the weekday. Okay. So the Gemara brings down the Mishnah we just learned. Tanat, we learned to the Mishnah. It says, Oise tafshil erev Yom Tov. When do you have to make this cooked food? That you have to make.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Hold on 1 second. Lisa, go ahead now. Okay, go ahead.
So the Mishnah says that the Erev needs to be made on before Shabbos. From before Yom Tov, I mean. And then you can lean on it for Shabbos to do it for Shabbos. You can cook B'tchila for Shabbos. So the Gemara asks, Bi shleima l'Rav Ashi the Omar. Mela, according to Rav Ashi, he says, Kidei sheyemru in Ephraim Yom Tov l'Shabbos, that the reason for the Erev Tavshilin is so that people will say, well, you're not allowed to just cook, even for Shabbos, so certainly you're not allowed to cook for the weekday. Okay. So we understand that's why you have to start the process from before Yom Tov, from Thursday, and then you're just finishing up. Bishloima l'Rav Ashi, the Omar l'Kvoid Yom Tov Tiknu. According to Rav Ashi, it fits. He said to honor the Yom Tov, they instituted it. Kidei sheyomru asur lahaschil b'shulei Shabbos b'Yom Tov. So people should say you're not allowed to start cooking of Shabbos on Yom Tov. So that's a Hainu Demerev Yom Tov. So you need to do it from before Yom Tov to show that you can't start cooking on Yom Tov itself, even for Shabbos. So you got to do it from before Yom Tov. We understand. Hainu Demerev Yom Tov in, Yom Tov loy. Only from Erev Yom Tov, yes, but on Yom Tov, no. But according to Rave, that you're cooking so to remind you to keep a good piece for Shabbos, the Omar Kadeshi Yivrer, that the reason why we want you to cook the Erev, so to make sure not to forget the Shabbos, my area Erev Yom Tov. So why is it only making the Erev Tavshilin from Thursday before Yom Tov? Afilu b'Yom Tov nami, even on Yom Tov itself, you should also be able to make the Erev Tavshilin. Rashi, afilu b'Yom Tov. Ya'aseyu lifnei sudas Yom Tov. So before you start your Yom Tov meal, make a food for Shabbos. Yeshkan zchiras Shabbos livrer b'noisov. So now we have remembering the Shabbos to choose the special portions for Shabbos. So why do we need to do it on Thursday? And the Gemara says, Enochinami, you're talking right. We don't need to do it from before Yom Tov. It would be sufficient to do it on Yom Tov. We worry there's a Gezerah that he might be negligent. Shemo Yivsha. He might Yishkach v'lo Yaref. He's going to forget and he's not going to make this Erev. Shum detorit, because he's preoccupied. So before Yom Tov starts, make the Erev Tashilin. I say actually nowadays it's the other way around. I think people are so preoccupied before Yom Tov, they almost forget to make the Erev. And on Yom Tov itself, people don't cook that much today, so it's mostly from before Yom Tov. But anyways, that's the what the Gemara.
Before Yom, we still make it before Yom.
What?
We still make it before Yom, right?
Still make what? I don't getting it.
We make the Erev Tavshilin before Yom Tov starts.
Right. So the Gemara says you can make the Erev Tavshilin on Yom Tov itself, but we worry you might be negligent because you're preoccupied. And the Gemara says, we brought down before a pasuk from Zohar Hashem Shabbos Lakatri, and the Gemara brings another Tana that he brings it from another source. V'Tana Maisilo Mehocham. So Rashi explains why we need another proof. I mean, this is not like we said before. This is B'chal Midrabanan. So Rashi says, "V'tana ma'isilacha kain derech shitas haTalmud." This is the style of the Talmud. Shemaschilin ha'meroyim lohoitzi tam min hamikra. When the Ameroyim started to learn out, derive a lesson, a reason from the pasuk, v'yesh tana shel Beitzah lomad oisim memokim achar, and there's a tana in a Beitzah who learned it from another place. Nokat hochi. So then he uses the lashon v'tana ma'isilo mehocha, meaning kuloimar ha'meroyim lomdu mikan. The Meroyim learned it from here. V'hatana lomad mikan, and the Tana learned from here. So basically, the Tana has a different source for this halacha. What does he learn? It says in the pasuk by Demon on Friday, it says, Eis asher oifu toifu. That which you want to bake, bake. Veis asher tevashlu bashelu. And that which you want to cook, cook. Everything should be done on Friday. That's what the pasuk says by Demon. But really, there's a duplicate language. What does it mean? Toifu eifu. Havale lemichtav Rashi. Esash toifu eifu. Sagt Rashi. Havale lemichtav. He should have said hayoim eiflu bashlo. Today, bake and cook instead of saying cook, bake, bake, cook, cook. Just say today, bake and cook. But this is a hint over here that alaremesu. This is a hint. Sheyesh loch yoim shishi shein oifen l'tzarech mocher. There is a yom that you can't bake for the next day. Friday you can bake, but sometimes you can't bake. When it's Yom Tov. However, eifu, if you baked already, which means you prepared, then you can continue baking. Kanom Rabbi Loza, Rabbi Loza says, Ein oifin elo al ha'ofu. You cannot bake only if it was already baked. Chamishi v'Shabbos. Oifin is past. We're talking about bread. Ein mevashlen, you don't cook. Elo ha'mevushla, only something what was cooked. Mikan somchu chachamim leiruvi tafshilim min ha'toyret. From here, the chachamim leaned to learn out that the erev tafshilim is min ha'toyret. So the Gemara told Rabbanon, Meiser b'Rabbi Elazar shoye Yoshev v'Doirish kol hayem kulei b'hilchos Yom Tov. There was a story that Rabbi Elazar was sitting in the Beis Medrash and expounding. It was Yom Tov, Yoshev v'Doirish b'Yom Tov. All day in the laws of Yom Tov. Some of the people got tired and wanted to go home to eat. So the first group left. Yotzusa Kat Rishona.
They're ready for Kiddush.
Yeah, they want to go home. Yotzusa Kat Rishona. We'll see soon what happens here. Lisoy Sudas Yom Tov, to go and have their meal. They let him speak. He was darshan. He was speaking. It's like the Kiddush club. The rabbi give his speech, and they go out and say l'chaim. No, so they went to eat their meal for Yom Tov, and they left the Rabbi Elazar. They left him to darshan. Omar, so he called about these people. He says, "Halolu balei patosim he patosim." Patosim is big barrels, and they have prepared big barrels, and they prepared it. Rashi says, "Ba'anu milin, umesach mishtois. I think it's kind of honey or spiced up and something, a drink, and they're meaning we're saying is they're like pompous. They're like big shots. They have big barrels of fancy drinks over there. Lefikach maru lotzis. That's why they were hasty to leave. Kalema, as if to say, Bale nefeshem. They're people of feel themselves. They're people of soul, meaning they have a good sense of themselves. Be'enam yigein l'shmoya Torah. They're not going to put effort to listen to the Torah. Here he's speaking Torah. They got to go eat. They don't want to wait. But this is the first group that left. Kachnia. Then the second group. Then he said, Omar. He says, Halolu bali chavias. These are the ones that have barrels. Barrel is not as big as the patosin, but it's also pretty big. And the Kach Lishi, the third group left, Omar, he said, Halolu bali kadim. These one have jugs smaller. I mean, they grouped them all. They started leaving. Kat Revis, Omar, when the fourth group went out, he said, Halolu bali liginim. Liginim is a smaller than even the jugs. So, Pat Chamishis, the fifth one, Omar, he said, Halolu bali krisis. Oh, they're just like a cup, even smaller. So now there's almost nobody left in the shul. His chilu kat shishis lotzis. The sixth group started to leave. So Omar, now he said, Halolu bali meira. These are masters of the curse, meaning he was basically cursing them. Meira means a curse. So these should be masters of the curse. Now, they didn't understand, the students. Why did he say that? Because the base medrash was emptying out, very empty. Everybody left, and it was embarrassing, and it was hard for him. So he said, "These are Bali Meira." Ad Mosim Yeshim Legarsin. So Nosan Einov B'Talmidim. So he puts his eyes in his student, and his chilu pnei mishtanim, their faces started to turn. His students weren't sure why he was upset. They thought he was upset that they didn't leave earlier because it's Yom Tov, they should be eating, and it should be Simchas Yom Tov. So their faces started to turn, because if the sixth group is so guilty that he cursed them like that, he said, Bala Me'era, so they're worried about themselves. Kisavurim, they thought, Shekoyes al-kat shishis, mipnei she'ichru lotzis. He thought that they were angering on the sixth group because they delayed to leave. So v'kolshkein aleinu, so for sure on us. Amar lahem, so he said to them, now, Bonai, my children, Loi lachem ani omer, I'm not saying this to you. Alo lahalolu shiyotzu, to these that left. Shemanichim chaye olam v'oiskim b'chaye shah. They neglect eternal life, and they occupy themselves in temporary life. Okay, so they stayed on Lincoln and Bismedish. Now, B'shas Pitiros, and when they left, Amar Lahem, he told them the verse, L'chu, go ahead, Ichlu mashmanim, eat sweets, or fat stuff, tasty. So Mikrohu b'Sefer Ezra, up till the end of the Pasuk, Ad ki chedves havayi mu'uschem, the joy of chedva is your strength. Yeah, where are you up to? Not in the middle of the class now. Ushtu mamtakim, and drink sweets. V'shilcha mones lein nochem lei, and send portions to one who has not prepared. Kekodesh hayom ladenenu, this day is holy to our master. Ba'al te'otzu, don't be sad. Ki chedes Hashem himouschem. The joy of Hashem is your strength. This is all the pasuk there. So he was kind of upset with them. And okay, I think we're going to leave over here because on top of that, I have to really go ahead and